What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing my latest 100% IV Shadow Pokemon, a level 50 Dratini, alongside its full evolution line with a shiny Shadow Dragonair and a shiny Shadow Dragonite. All of these Pokemon actually got buffed this season with Wrap on both Dratini and Dragonair, and Hurricane on Dragonite, which I've already showcased in the Ultra League this season, but I personally think it performed a lot better here in the Great League. I've also opted for Thunder Punch over Superpower this time around, which made it a lot more consistent, not having to debuff myself every time I wanted to throw the cheaper energy charge move. Now, let me be clear, this is obviously a meme team. It's almost an instant loss into something like a Tinkaton or a Alolan Ninetales, which unfortunately I saw quite a lot of today in the 6 sets that I did with this team. However, I have cut out a lot of those battles because you don't really get anything from them, but I was still able to fight back against other very strong counters to the team and pull off some crazy wins. So with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What 100% IV Shadow Pokemon have you caught in Pokemon Go? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Alright, so go into the first battle, leading shiny Shadow Dragonair into a Cradilly. The opponent is going to be on Bullet Seed, which makes this a fairly positive matchup for me because even if they land the Rock Tomb, they are never going to put me into range where they can Bullet Seed farm me down. We fire off the Aqua Tail, they actually shield the first charge move. Now, the opponent is going to go for the Rock Tomb, but you can see that is never going to put me into range where they can farm me down. The opponent tries to catch the Aqua Tail there, but we're not falling for it. We're going to fire off a Wrap, and what this is going to do, even though I was just debuffed there with the Rock Tomb, is going to allow me to get the knockout with just a singular Thunder Punch. So at this point, I'm going to shield up the charge move as the opponent fires off the Ice Beam, which of course, going to hit for double super effective, would very comfortably get the one-shot, but now we've got back-to-back Thunder Punches. Thunder Punch, number 1, actually going to grab the final shield, but we can very comfortably win CMP. Thunder Punch, number 2, gonna connect, and it gets the KO. You see my Switch Lock is coming up in time, so I'm going to swap back into my Shadow Dragonair, catch the Rock Tomb gets the knockout, and now it's time to bring in my Shadow Dratini. I'm going to wait out my Switch Lock here as I am now Switch Locked, and the opponent's going to be swapping out into a Shadow Machamp, a Pokemon I've not seen in quite a while, but unfortunately for the opponent, Twister nearly gets the KO. We Dragon Breath falling down, and so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. I'm going to see a Dusknoir in the lead. So this is going to be a fairly neutral matchup here, so we are just going to choose to stay in. Of course, we're running an ABA, well, not an ABA, sort of an AAA team, but I guess Dragonite does have some slightly different weaknesses and resistances to the team, but either way, in neutral situations, I am just going to stay in with the Dragonair most of the time. We're going to fire off an Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to get the knockout from this range. The opponent is going to use their final shield. However, looks like we would just narrowly reach another Aqua Tail, and so they're forced to throw some energy. That's quite nice for me. We can now come in with the Shadow Dragonite and get the Dragon Breath farm down. They're going to come in with a Azumarill, and this will take 2 Thunder Punches to get the knockout. However, I do have quite a significant energy advantage, and I also have the shield advantage. So I'm looking to be in a really good position, of course, resisting the bubble damage, not really taking much fast food pressure whatsoever. So now I'm just going to look to overfarm as much as possible. We fire off the Thunder Punch just before they reach Ice Beam number 2. Thunder Punch gets the knockout, and they come in with a Kanto Marowak, and this is where having Hurricane is going to be very nice. Hurricane going to get the one-shot there, taking out the Kanto Marowak, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. I'm going to see Gastrodon in the lead, so we would prefer to see it up against the Dragonite. However, the opponent is actually going to swap out and into an Empoleon, so I'm just going to choose to stay in. Now, I did mention that, of course, well, Dragonair is going to be the Pokemon that we do stay in up against neutral Pokemon. Obviously, this is not the best matchup for me because everything I can throw is resisted. However, because we do have a slight energy advantage, I can actually go for a Wrap and an Aqua Tail, threaten the shield, and then swap out into my Dratini, saving my Dragonite, which is, of course, going to have a great matchup into that Gastrodon. Not only that, because we get a 0-turn swap, we get the Dragon Breath through, we can actually outpace them to the Twister, getting the knockout, and now they come back in with the Gastrodon. At this point, we are going to wait out our Switch Lock, and we're going to come in with our Shadow Dragonite. Of course, resisting the Mud Slap damage, they're going to come in with a Corviknight, but we've got access to super effective Thunder Punch. So Thunder Punch, we're going to throw it straight away. It connects, and it does decent damage. Now here, they did farm up quite a lot of energy. They are going to go for a Sky Attack there, which is quite surprising, which means now I can look to overfarm a little bit more for potentially swapping into my Dragonair to sponge the damage from the charge move. So we swap into Dragonair. We are going to force some energy from the opponent. Sky Attack, of course, gonna get the knockout there, but can I commit to the full farm down? Dragonite able to get that farm down, coming out very close to the Hurricane. Hurricane is going to connect. All shields are down. It actually doesn't quite get the one shot this time around, but a couple more Dragon Breaths get the farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to win there. Into the next battle, we're going to see a charge bug in the lead. So this is going to be a slightly positive matchup for me, but you're going to see two X-Scissors are going to very comfortably get the KO here. And I do have to be careful of the opponent trying to snipe me with something in the back line. But either way, I'm going to fire off the wrap here. And then here, I probably should have just thrown the charge move. What I didn't want to do was throw it on alignment and have the opponent go for the extra volt switch. But actually, I could have just fired off the Arctel and potentially either grabbed both shields or just got the knockout there because I had debuffed their defense. Now, unfortunately, Dragonite not barely able to get the full farm down there, which means I have to use a shield anyway. So honestly, not playing this matchup very well so far, but the opponent going to come in with a Guzzlord. So we're full sending Hurricane. Hurricane going to be shielded. I swap into my Dratini, and their final Pokemon is going to be an Azumarill. Now, unfortunately for us, Dratini has the worst matchup against the Azumarill just because we don't hit very hard here with the wraps. And of course, yes, we are going to debuff the defense. Unfortunately, we're just not really doing any damage at all with the Dragon Breath damage here. So either way, I'm going to look to overfarm as much as possible. I'm hoping my switch clock will come up in time, and it actually does. The opponent, they do overfarm by a single bubble. Is that going to make a huge difference here? Ice Beam gets the knockout. They swap back into Guzzlord, and we've got the Twister. Does this do enough damage? Twister not able to get the knockout there, unfortunately. The opponent reaching a Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing going to be taking out the Dratini, and unfortunately, I lose that game. But GG's up on there. Into the next battle, we're going to see Galvantula in the lead this time around. So very similar lead. This time we are just going to go straight for an Arctel because we don't really need to full send a wrap. Arctel is going to threaten a shield. They're going to swap out into Hydreigon. So honestly, just a very spicy version of the team we just faced here. Hydreigon going to have to shield even a resisted Arctel. And at this point, I should be able to come in with either Pokemon, shield once, and then Dragon Breath farm them down. But we're going to choose to come in with the Dratini here, shielding up the Brutal Swing, Dragon Breath farming them down, and let's see what they want to do. They come back in with the Galvantula. I did think about no shielding here, however, I'm actually going to shield the lunge. I'm now going to look to massively overfarm, and I'm going to throw a Twister just before they reach the next lunge. Twister, even debuffed, will get the KO there. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Shadow Greninja, so honestly, just a very spicy version of the previous team here, with, of course, Greninja replacing the Azumarill. At this point, the opponent actually overfarms, and I could have thrown the Thunder Punch, but this is kind of a Dratini showcase, so we're going to let the Night Slash get the knockout. We're going to go straight for the Twister. Twister, of course, neutral damage, pretty good charge move, takes out the Shadow Greninja, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's to opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see Florges in the lead. So, of course, not a great matchup for me. However, I am hoping that the opponent will just be on Trailblaze and Chilling Water as the charge moves, in which case, all of those charge moves are going to be resisted by the entirety of my team. So, I'm going to no-shield this. The opponent goes for the Trailblaze, boosting up their attack stat. I can reach the Arctel here, which is quite nice for me. The opponent might actually end up no-shielding this because they know they can live it, and they will go for the Fairy Wind farm down. At this point, I'm going to come in with my Shadow Dratini, hoping that I can go for a full Dragon Breath farm down, but of course, they are going to reach a charge route. They go for another Trailblaze. We do get that Dragon Breath snipe, which is really nice. And let's see, the opponent's going to come in with a Corviknight. So at this point, we are going to outpace them because we do have the energy advantage, and we can go for Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch, going to hit for super effective damage. This is just going to be an air cutter, and I know I can live this relatively comfortably. However, what I don't want to do is no shield, and then have whatever their final Pokemon is, come in, and then just fully fast move farm me down before we even reach another charge move. So I'm actually going to look to double shield in this matchup. I'm hoping I can eventually put them into range where we can Dragon Breath farm them down. We're going to swap back into Dratini to catch another air cutter here. Air Cutter is going to get the knockout, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Primeape. So this is going to be very close here. Can we get to back-to-back Thunder Punches before they get to the Ice Punch? Unfortunately, no. I think Thunder Punch wouldn't KO anyways. We'd need a superpower, which we don't have. Close Combat, they're actually not even on Ice Punch. Rage Fist, honestly, probably would have taken me out, but Close Combat, even resisted damage, definitely gets the KO there, and unfortunately, I lose that game. So, GG to that opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see another Galvantula in the lead. So again, we're going to go for the Arctel. Arctel is going to be shielded. And this time around, the opponent is going to look to overfarm ever so slightly. I can actually live a lunge here, so I will no shield this. However, that does quite a lot of damage, and the opponent able to snipe me with a Jellicent. However, we can now come in with our Shadow Dragonite. I'm going to shield this. The opponent actually on Ice Beam there, which is kind of overkill up against a Dragonite, but up against something like an Altaria, for example, they're probably not going to shield that. So honestly, quite quite a cool moveset on the Jellicent. They're going to come back in with the Galvantula, and here I do look to overfarm. However, I'm getting myself very low, to the point where if they shield this, I might be in trouble. So I'm going to swap out. You can see my Dragonite barely has any HP remaining, maybe 1 or 2 HP at most. Either way, I'm going to go for a Twister. Maybe I should have gone for Wrap here. Honestly, I don't think I used Wrap on Dratini at all, and it was a little bit disappointing. I probably should have just settled for Arctotail, just because you are slightly faster, and up against Fire-type Pokemon, for example, Arctotail is going to be very nice. However, I was trying to run a triple buffed moveset here, so we're running Wrap. Either way, we come back in with the Dragonite. You can see we have basically no HP, but we're able to Dragon Breath farm them down before the opponent gets that Volt Switch farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Claydol in the lead, and they're actually on Confusion, which is quite interesting to see. Mudslap is usually preferred. However, of course, Mudslap did get nerfed a couple seasons ago, so, well, I guess last season at this point. But either way, we're going to shield a Rock Tomb. I do still have super effective Arctotail here, which I can throw, so we're going to go for the Arctotail. Arctotail is going to get them fairly low if they no shield, and we can snipe them with the Shadow Dragonite. However, unfortunately, they're going to come in with a Wall Rain. They're hitting for huge damage with the Powder Snows. I'm only reaching one move. Hurricane would do more damage than a super effective Thunder Punch. However, they're always going to shield there anyways, so I guess it doesn't really matter what I throw. We're going to come in with the Dratini, and I'm really hoping my Switch Clock will come up in time. The opponent fires off the Icicle Spear. It's going to be close, but you can see just barely about half a second out there. We're not able to swap out. I'm not able to catch a Charge Move. Of course, I don't know what they had in the back. Likely Dratini, at such low HP by the time we get the KO up against the Wall Rain, probably can't get the win there anyways, but it would have been nice to at least find out. But either way, GG to a trainer into next battle. We're going to see Ferret in the lead, so this is going to be a neutral matchup here, and I'm just going to no-shield the first move. Swift is going to deal big damage there. I'm now going to go for one Dragon Breath, fire off the Wrap. Wrap also going to hit for huge damage, and I'm able to snipe them. Well, actually not quite. The opponent swaps out there. I don't know if they banked a Charge Move or not, but they're going to come in with more Pekko, and they actually call a Thunder Punch bait. Now, of course, it's not really a bait because I only have resisted Charge Move to throw. However, I could have been running Superpower, and they could have just no-shield and gone down there. But either way, we do get the Dragon Breath farm down, and the final Pokemon is going to be a Talonflame. So this is a pretty good matchup for me. I'm actually going to swap out, though, because I am debuffed there in my defense. And what I don't want to do is allow the opponent to just fully Incinerate farm me down there, because that would be game over. Whereas now, of course, we come in with a Dratini. We don't have Arctotail, but we've got Twister. Twister no-shielded, as we do have the threat of a Thunder Punch and an Arctotail on my 2 back Pokemon, so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. Going to see a Talonflame in the lead this time around, so a great lead matchup for me, and I can just go immediately for the Arctotail, throwing after 9 Dragon Breaths as soon as we get there, which is also perfect timing up against a 5-turn move like Incinerate. Well, I guess the only 5-turn move, but either way, we're going to shield the fly. Then I'm going to swap out into a Volt Switch Shadow Fortress, so we're just going to choose to stay in here. Of course, we don't have that much neutral pressure. We do have, of course, Arctotail, which we are going to throw, but if I swap out into Dragonite, whilst I do hit for neutral damage with the Thunder Punches and the Hurricanes, I am actually going to take neutral damage from the Volt Switches, whereas I am resisting them here. So the opponent goes for Rock Tomb. I think I'm now just going to come in with my Dratini, hoping that I can live a Rock Tomb on the Dratini and bank a Charge Move. The opponent, they go for the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb does huge damage there. I swap out immediately as the opponent comes in with a Gastrodon, but this is a great matchup for me, as we've already seen since I am running Hurricane. I'm going to no-shield the Body Slam. I'm now going to look to overfarm, throw on CMP, throwing as late as possible, building up as much energy as possible, getting the knockout there, and let's see what they want to do. They're going to come back in with the Talonflame. I'm going to throw a Thunder Punch just before the damage from that next Incinerate registers. Thunder Punch gets the KO. I need Dragonite to live. One more Volt Switch. It's able to do exactly that. We get to a Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch takes out the Fortress. However, I did actually, I believe, have a Twister loaded on the Dratini, so I guess it wouldn't have really mattered. But either way, GG's to the opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see another Claydol. This time around, they are on Mudslap, so that is kind of the expected move that you will see on Claydol. The opponent's going to swap out into Credilli, and this is a fine matchup for me. We have such a huge energy advantage. However, the opponent, in chipping with the Mudslap damage, will put me into range where a Rock Tomb might not get the KO, but they might be able to Bullet Seed farm me down this time around, and yeah, that is going to be the case. So we swap into our Shadow Dratini. I look to throw on CMP, and Dratini able to win CMP in this matchup up against the Credilli. At this point, I'm not going to bother shielding just yet. We know that they've got 2 Rock Tomb users so far. It might be a 3rd Rock Tomb user, in which case I do want to save my shields for my Shadow Dragonite. They've got quite a lot of energy here on the Claydol. We're going to come in with that Dragonite, and I am going to look to use a shield. The opponent fires off the Rock Tomb. I'm going to look to try and catch the next one onto my Dratini here as I am debuffed, but now we do at least clear the debuff, but we don't get to the charge move, and this is something that I've noticed recently. Stuff like one-turn bring-in lag that we are seeing a lot of, well, occurring a lot on the new code actually also seems to be occurring a lot on the old code now as well. So it looks like even the old code is not safe from the new bugs that are coming with the new update, which is really frustrating. And of course, now that I'm debuffed here, you're going to see this Hurricane gonna deal huge damage, but it doesn't get the KO there. And of course, if I just threw the Hurricane there before the opponent could debuff me, this is probably a very comfortable win. But unfortunately, we end up losing due to one-turn bring-in lag. But either way, into next battle. GG's to that trainer, by the way. We're going to lead into a Greninja. So I'm going to no-shield the first charge route as the opponent is going to go straight for a Night Slash. And now they're going to look to swap out into a Primeape. I'm actually going to go for Wrap here. Wrap is going to do more damage. I expect to grab a shield anyways, but hopefully now that will allow me to come in with the Shadow Dragonite, look to double shield, and then just fully Dragon Breath farm them down. So far, my Dragonite has a lot of play into both of their Pokemon, so they might have a hard answer in the back. But either way, having a ton of energy is going to put me in a great position. So the opponent is going to come in with a Dunsparce. Now, of course, they probably expect a superpower, so we full send the Hurricane. That ends up being shielded, but I'm now going to look to swap out and catch the move onto my Dratini. Of course, the opponent going to go for a Rock Slide here. Rock Slide does decent damage. We will reach a Twister on the CMP tie. However, the opponent is not going to bother throwing, instead committing to a full fast move farm down, and they end up getting that farm down. Now, I do have a Thunder Punch loaded on my Dragonite. What I don't want to do, however, is have it caught onto a Greninja. So we're actually going to come in with the Dragonair. They fire off the Rock Slide. We can now look to overfarm by just a little amount here. Go for a Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch gets the knockout, and I can go straight for the next Thunder Punch. Not throwing on very good timing, but it really doesn't matter. Thunder Punch gets the knockout up against the Greninja, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. We can see a Tinkaton in the lead. So, of course, this is not a great matchup for me. We've got triple resisted fast move pressure across the entire team. We're going to go for the Arcatel. Arcatel is going to 3-shot them. However, they're just going to reach these charge moves too quickly for me. So, I'm going to shield the first, and they bait with a Bulldoze. That is really frustrating. However, this is just going to be another Bulldoze, so I can at least no-shield this. Bulldoze is going to drop my defense this time around, which is not ideal for me. However, I might still just barely hang on and reach the next move, but no, it doesn't look like it. So instead, we're going to swap out into our Dratini, and I can at least reach a Twister. However, Twister is triple resisted. That actually would not get the KO there. However, the opponent is going to shield. They've obviously realized we are incredibly weak to this Tinkaton, and so unfortunately, it's quite likely that at this point, they end up double shielding the Tinkaton, and we honestly really struggle to take this Pokemon out. So here we throw as late as possible. We fire off the Thunder Punch, and the opponent is going to double shield their Tinkaton. So not the best position for me to be in. They full send a Gigaton Hammer. They swap out into their own Dragon and Flying type Pokemon in Altaria. We've got access to Hurricane. Hurricane actually doesn't get the knockout there. We do snipe with the Dragon Breath damage from a Dragonair. However, their final Pokemon is going to be Unova and Stunfisk. And whilst, yes, we do have super effective coverage, we need 2 Arcatels to get the knockout. And unfortunately, they can actually resist the Thunder Shock farming down, come out with the charge we've loaded. And of course, up against the Dragonite, Discharge gets the KO. And unfortunately, I lose that game. So, GG's to opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see a Typhlosion in the lead, so a much better lead matchup for me. Of course, we are going to outpace them by a single turn, and of course, we do also resist everything they can possibly throw. So at this point, the opponent's going to bank the energy, swapping out, trying to catch a charge move onto Jellicent. However, unfortunately for them, it is very hard to catch charge moves when you're using a 5-turn move. So at this point, we're now going to look to overfarm and then fire off a Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch will get the knockout from this range, and the opponent not going to bother shielding. They come back in with the Typhlosion, but they do not throw straight away, allowing me to reach another Thunder Punch, and Thunder Punch gotta be shielded before the opponent can reach their own Thunder Punch. At this point, Thunder Punch is going to get the knockout. We can come back in with either Pokemon. The opponent's going to swap out into a Credilli, but this should now just be game over. All I have to do is not go for a shield here. Instead, look to throw an Octail on the CMP tire, winning CMP, and this is going to put them into range where we can perfectly farm them down with my Shadow Dratini. So at this point, we're not going to bother shielding. Rock Tomb will, of course, get the knockout. We can come back in with the Dratini, get the fast move farm down. The opponent, they're going to need a Blast Burn to get the knockout. However, we're already at the Twister. Twister gets the KO up against the Typhlosion, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. We're going to see a Shadow Fortress in the lead. However, they are on Bug Bite rather than Volt Switch, which does make this a lot worse for me, or at least for the Dragonair. It makes it better for the Dragonite, but of course, we don't want to swap it in. So at this point, I'm going to look to shield here, and then I will swap out into my Dragonite, so maybe a questionable play there. Not really sure why exactly I've done that, but we've done it. So here, we're going to go for a Thunder Punch. I want to throw this just before they do reach a potential Rock Tomb, and the opponent is now at the energy for the Rock Tomb, so of course, I'm going to look to shield, and they go for the debuff. They're now going to come in with a Shadow Reshiram, so we don't have access to superpower. The opponent doesn't know that though, so of course they are going to use a shield, and my Dragonair, I believe, is very close to the Arctotail. Actually, we've already got it loaded, so I am just going to throw immediately. Arctotail is neutral damage. It gets the KO up against the very classy Reshiram. I'm going to be swapping out straight away into Dratini. Honestly, I was expecting a second Dragon-type Pokemon, but it's actually going to be a Shadow Swampert. So at this point, the opponent, I'm going to go for Hydro Cannon. I'm able to tank that. I do throw on CMP, which is not the best for me as we end up losing it, but it's going to be a simultaneous KO. Nope, never mind. They snipe with the Shadow Fortress, and unfortunately, Bug Bite's just dealing slightly too much damage there, able to take out my Dragonair, and we end up losing that game. But GG's opponent into the next battle, and I believe possibly the final battle of this video as well. The opponent going to be swapping out there, looking to catch a charge move onto Azumarill. However, we're just going to hold onto the energy, come in with the Shadow Dragonite, shield up the Ice Beam, and then fire off these Thunder Punches. We are considerably spammier than the Azumarill, so even though we did take a while to swap out, we can outpace them to the next charge move, and I will look to throw on CMP. So Thunder Punch is going to grab a shield from the opponent. At this point, I'm also going to double shield here. I will very comfortably outpace them to the next charge move, and I am putting them into range, but actually, I can probably get the KO with an Arctotail. So here, the opponent does now have the energy for the Ice Beam, but I'm going to snipe with my Shadow Dragonair, hoping Arctotail resisted damage will KO, and it does exactly that. They come back in with Feraligatr, but they lose track of my energy. We're already at the Wrap. Wrap gets the knockout there. Their final Pokemon going to be Shadow Venusaur, and so they just concede the match. So, GG's opponent there. I guess that was not the final battle. This is the final battle, also up against a Shadow Feraligatr in the lead. I guess that's why I got them confused. Either way, they're going to be swapping out into Dunsparce, so I'm going to chip with the Wrap here. Wrap is actually going to be shielded by the opponent, and this time, what I'm going to look to do is catch a second Draw Run onto my Shadow Dragonite, where of course, it will be double resisted. So we're able to make the catch there, which is really nice. Hopefully, this is the Draw Run and not a Rock Slide, because that would be very awkward. But yes, it is the Draw Run. At this point, I think this can only be a Draw Run. I guess maybe it could be a Rock Slide. Either way, I'm going to shield, I'm going to play it safe, but either way, they're now going to come back in with the Shadow Feraligatr, and we've got a lot of energy. So Thunder Punch, not shielded, it gets the KO. They come back in with the Dunsparce, but Dragonite able to get the full farm down. We've got a Hurricane loaded. I'm just throwing this blindly into whatever comes in. The opponent doesn't respect it. One Dragon Breath from Dratini gets the farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.